Hi, this is Pastor Joe Green, founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. And I just want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our Patreon. We ask you to be a blessing and possibly set up to where you can be a regular contributor to the 2019 movement. I believe that as we transition into 2018, the year 2018 on the calendar, we are moving into a even more critical time for us to have our eyes awakened, and for us to move into what God has for us is very important. So with that being said, I wanted to share today, I think part of the reason that people of color, especially black people, so-called black people, or people of African descent, why it seems that we are under such siege, not just here but other nations as well. We have had some issues. We have been oppressed. We have been really mistreated. And as the Bible says, it seems sometimes like we become a byword as a whole. Now, it doesn't mean all of us, but it means that as a whole, especially in the United States of America, we used to be the #2 minority group, or the #1 minority group, #2 nationality in America. Now we are down to 3 and possibly down to 4 soon. When you look at the rates of incarceration, when you look at the homicide rate within the so-called black community, when you look at the fact that even economically we have one of the lowest per capita incomes in America. As a people, we don't own anything. You figure even in Africa itself is the richest continent by natural resources on the planet. But yet people in Africa are among the poorest. If you think about the fact that gold, diamonds, and oil, Africa is rich, is wealthy. You know, the very land itself is wealthy. But yet Africans don't have their own car companies. We don't have our own manufacturing. Most of the companies that are there that are profiting are from other continents, whether it's Chinese that have gone and done a lot of work, or the Europeans, or even the Americans. It seems like African and the people of Africa are very disenfranchised historically. Now that historically, it hasn't always been the case, and I'm going to share a couple of thoughts that kind of my insight on this. Now, I always base everything on the Bible, based on the historical accounts of the Bible and the historical accounts of what we see has going on. So I want to share this with you. And if you look in Exodus chapter 4, there's the story of Moses, and in Exodus 3 is when Moses was called by God to go into Egypt and to deliver the children of Israel. Before that, we had Abraham, who was the one that God called to make a great nation out of. The Bible says in Genesis 12, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and through your seed all the nations of the world will be blessed. Now, Abraham came from Babylon, or Babel, which is the forerunner to Babylon. He came out of that. His family lived in Babylon under the time of Nimrod. So when God pulls Abraham out of, when he tells him come out from among your people, he's telling him to come out of Babylon, and that system, which we know the Bible says Mystery Babylon, the great, the mother of all harlots and the abominations of the earth. So the book of Revelation, at the end time, it has this stirring of the Mystery Babylon religion, the one world government and the one world economy that Jesus ultimately comes and destroys. So we see Abraham being called out of that. And then we see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We know that Joseph was a descendant of Abraham. He went into Egypt. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. He went into Egypt, and once he got there, he became the prime minister through a couple of occurrences. And then because of that, Israel, or the descendants of Abraham, ended up living in Egypt. Then you have 400 years later, after Abraham, 435 years altogether, I believe it was, that Moses is raised up as the deliverer for the people. Now, Exodus 3 is when Moses gets his marching orders, if you will, by God. Exodus 4 has a very interesting account, though. I want to share this with you. It says in Exodus 4 verse 6, and the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now your hand in your bosom, and put his hand And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he had took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow, or white as snow. And he said, put thine hand in thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it from his bosom, and behold, it turned again as his other flesh. Now this is a peculiar set of verses, because if you think about what is happening, Moses was testing God. He wanted to be sure that he was hearing correctly, that God was sending him as the deliverer, that he was the type of Messiah, if you will, that was promised through Abraham, that your descendants will be in Egypt for 400 years, and then I'm going to deliver them. So this was the promise of that. So we have here that Moses is the fulfillment of that promise. Now Moses goes to the burning bush. He's not sure, because Moses is hiding in the backside of the desert when God calls him. But one of the tests that God gives him is, he says, put your hand into your cloak, or into your garment, or whatever you want to call it. And when he pulled it out, it said his hand turned white. Now, the reason that's interesting is because if his hand turned white and it was a sign that God was calling him, then obviously Moses' skin color was different than the white skin that it became. And then when he put it back in, it became the same color again. We also see in Exodus chapter 2, before this time, in Exodus chapter 2, beginning with verse 5, going down to verse 10, it's the story of Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses, because Pharaoh, the children of Israel, was in Egypt for all these years. A Pharaoh, they go from being in a high level status to being in a low level status. The Pharaoh that is raised up after that didn't know about Joseph, and didn't know about the favor that the preceding Pharaoh had given to Egypt. And so he puts them in bondage, he oppresses them, and so he also has this sign, because a lot of times you have to understand that these things were, you had these people, these astrologers, these astronomers, these witches and magicians that were in these places, that they were connected to the spirit realm, and so they understood what God was doing. So they understood the time and the prophecy that God was sending a deliverer. So Pharaoh has all the firstborn males, or all the babies, the male babies, killed in Egypt, all the Hebrew babies killed. And so Moses's mother, and I believe very clearly it was the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, puts Moses in a basket and puts him in the river to go down the river. Pharaoh's daughter finds him, takes him into Pharaoh's house, and raises him as though that was her son. So this is important, because I wanted to establish, first of all, that Moses was a man of color. He wasn't white, he was a person of color. And so he wasn't Charlton Heston, as the movie Moses, the 10 Commandments from many years ago portrayed. And I want to say, as I go forward, that it doesn't matter, because we know that the promise of Abraham was that all the nations of the world, all the families of the world would come together through Abraham's seed. So God's intention always is for all the nations, all the ethnic groups, all the races and families of the world to be united in Christ. That's his goal. So I don't give this message as a way to separate races or put one race over the other, but I think it's important for us to understand the identity and the purpose behind some of the events that have occurred historically, as it pertains to black people. So Moses was a person of color. Moses goes he's raised in Egypt in Pharaoh's household, and as Pharaoh's daughter's child. So that would have been Pharaoh's grandson. So if that's Pharaoh's grandson, then obviously, in order for people to have believed that that was Pharaoh's grandson, he must have been the same, he must have resembled Pharaoh to a certain extent. Now, I want to take it a little bit deeper, because that's a simplistic a proof that that Moses was a person of color. You have to understand that Egypt was, in Hebrew, the name for Egypt is Misraim, and Misraim was a descendant of Ham, and we know that Ham was black. So Ham was the youngest son of Noah, and out of him sprang several different groups of people that the Bible talks about. So if you look in Genesis 5:32, Genesis 6:10, and elsewhere, it talks about Ham, who is a descendant of the father. He's a descendant. Ham is a son of Noah. He's the father of Canaan. He's also the father of Mishraim. Mishraim is where the Hebrew name for Egypt. So Egypt was actually the land of Mishraim. Canaan was a son of Ham as well. And so we understand that they're related. So when Israel is in Egypt and Moses looks like Pharaoh, Ham was a black person. He was a person of color. So when you look in the Bible, you had the sons of Noah were Ham, Japheth, and Shem. So the name Shem means dusky. Japheth means fair or white. And Ham means burnt or black. And so when you think about the fact that all nationalities of the world, anthropologists have separated them into races. So you have the Negroid, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid. Caucasoid, of course, is where we get the word Caucasian from, and that's the white race. You have Mongoloid, which is where you get the Asian race from, and then you have Negroid, where you get the sub-Saharan black African races from, or sub-Saharan people. And so these are the three classifications of human beings. So when you think about Shem, Japheth, and Ham, you understand that Ham is the originator of the black race. Japheth is fair, and Shem is dusky, which would be most likely the Mongoloid race. So Mizraim was the son of Ham. He's also the brother of Phut and Canaan. And so Ham, of course, skin meant dark or burnt. He was a black person. So when you think about that, you have Ham, who is black. You have Mizraim, who is his son, and who is where the Egyptian people came from. And then you get Canaan, which is also a descendant of Ham, so they were black as well. The Canaanites. Nimrod was the son of Cush, who's the son of Ham. So Nimrod was black again. So if you think about Abraham living in Babel, they were black people. And he comes out of that, he goes into Egypt, and when his descendants go into Egypt, Joseph, who is living in Mizraim or Egypt, lives in and is promoted to the prime minister of Egypt. And because he had painted his face and wore the clothes of Egypt, when Joseph's brothers came to see him, they didn't know he wasn't one of the Egyptians. They thought he was one of the Egyptians. So again, that's further proof that says that these were people of color. These were people of the black race. Now, I'm going to go a little bit deeper and show you why I believe also, as I mentioned, that the black race is in pretty bad shape, or has been for some time now, just around the world. Africa, in America, you have many places. Now, you do have individuals who are successful, but I'm saying as a whole. Now, Ham, of course, in Genesis 9, you have this story of Ham's youngest son, Canaan, getting cursed. And what happened? In Genesis 9, it says that Ham uncovered his father's nakedness. So Noah gets drunk. He passes out. It says that Ham uncovers his father's nakedness. Now, there's a couple of different interpretations as to what that means. So the one interpretation is that, and this is the one that I adhere to, is that Ham had sex with his mother, or Noah's wife. It says that he uncovered his mother's nakedness, and then he told his brothers about it, and his two brothers, Shem and Japheth, it says they took a blanket and they walked backwards and covered up their father's nakedness. So it would make sense that that was their mother, because nobody would want to see their mother naked, especially after someone had just had sex with her. So another hypothesis is that Ham may have sodomized Noah, or had sex with Noah. Now, although that could be also true, it could have been, two things. But the reason that that doesn't make as much sense is because, again, the Bible says that Shem and Japheth took a cover and walked backwards so they didn't look at their father's nakedness and covered him up. I don't think it would be a big deal if their dad was just laying there drunk and naked, but I think that it would be improper for if their mother was laying there naked. They didn't want to look on their mom as she is naked. So that's why I hold to that particular, you know, hypothesis, if you will. So anyway, when you understand and how we get the fact that uncovering your father's nakedness part would have been having sex with your wife, because in Leviticus 18, it has a whole list of forbidden practices. And what God says, because we understand that Ham is the predecessor to Egypt and to Canaan, and we believe to what happens, I'm going to find Leviticus 18 real quick, and I'm going to read it to you. Leviticus 18, it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, I am the Lord your God. After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein you dwelt, shall you not do, and after the manner of the land of Canaan, where I will bring you, shall you not do, neither walk in their ordinances, but do after their judgments." So these are rituals that they did in Egypt as well as Canaan. Now, of course, when you know that they both are descendants of Ham, Ham somehow or another, and based on the accounts in Genesis 6 and the rabbinical writings, is that you have these fallen angels that came and taught man to sin. Starting in Genesis 3 and other places, that these fallen angels taught mankind rituals and customs that were demonic, and they violated God's commandments and God's laws. And so that's why they were wicked. Nimrod, who was, you know, the leader of Babel, would have taught humanity, he would have passed on these traditions and these rituals, which they would have practiced in Egypt and Canaan. And then in Leviticus 18, it lists a whole list of these practices. And that's when it makes a reference to the fact that don't uncover your father's nakedness. It's your mother, you know, it's your father's wife. That's your father's nakedness. And there's a reason why God tells them specifically, don't take on these customs and these rituals. It's because these are the things that they practice in Egypt and in the land of Canaan. And so he's telling Israel not to take on these practices. And then he reiterates to them the Torah, or the law of God. These are the acceptable sex practices, and the sexual practices that God made gives allowance for is a male and a female, husband and wife, coming together, marrying, having children, procreating, and passing on those traditions to their children. So Genesis 18, God says, the reason I'm going to make Abraham a great nation is because he's going to diligently teach his children the ways of God. So Abraham teaches his children the Torah, passes on the right way. They come into contact with the Egyptians, who are violating God's Torah, or their laws. Israel holds on to this, and then he reminds them when they come out of Egypt, don't take on those customs, don't pass them on to your children. Pass on to your children the teaching of the Torah, or the law of God, so that you can be blessed. And then he reminds them, when you go into Canaan land, don't take on those customs, because the land literally has vomited them out because they have violated God's commandments. So the ways of the Canaanites and the Egyptians, which is a offshoot of the Mystery Babylon religion, you have homosexuality, more specifically male sodomy. They have bestiality, incest. They would have orgies, sexual orgies. If you remember, because they were in Egypt for a while, some of them actually picked up these customs. And so when Moses went up on the mountain to get the Torah and he came down, it said that they were having this big wild orgy, because everybody's around, they're naked, they're having these orgies, and they're worshiping the golden calf. And the golden calf was one of the things that they had taken from the worship in Egypt. So just goes ahead, it goes on to continue to pass on. So you have to understand that there's been two streams from the very beginning. God gives his commandments to his people for them to follow. Very early on, Lucifer taught men to err, the fallen angel. They continually pass that on because that's a worship to Lucifer, or the devil. Violating God's commandments or his laws. He says, I want you to walk in my ordinances so that you can be blessed. When you violate my ordinances, then you're cursed. And so I'm going to read that here, but I want you to understand that this has been since the very beginning. If you look at Freemasonry and the Masonic organizations, as you get to the top, they believe that they are descendants of Cain and the sons of Cain. You had Cain and Abel, right? And when you look at Cain and Abel, Abel followed the laws of God, and his sacrifice that he gave was accepted. Cain's wasn't. Cain was the son of rebellion, and he was marked, and because of that, he violated God's commandments, and he was cast out from being considered, receiving the blessings of God. And that's what the Masonic organizations, if you ever get a chance and you read Albert Pike's book called Morals and Dogmas, they talk about this. If you look at some of the ancient writings that they have, they believe that they're descendants of Cain. The fallen angels, of course, the fallen angels taught man how to violate God's commandments and therefore worship the God of this world, which is the devil. And that's the way that they gain power, by worshiping their deity. And so God consistently tells Israel, don't take on the customs of these people, because these people are worshiping the devil. They have these rituals and these practices that they are doing, and it's a way of channeling demonic occultic power. And so that's why you see nowadays, when you keep hearing about all these, the pedophilia, the homosexuality, all these, the sexual immorality and everything that goes on, it's all happening because as we get closer and closer to the return of the Lord, that there's only two kingdoms that are at work here. And so if you're part of the kingdom of God, then you resist these immoral practices and you follow after God's laws and his commandments. But if you are of this world, then you follow after the customs and the laws of the world, which is sexual immorality, perversion, and all these other things. So when you understand that in the book of Jubilees, I read in the book of Jubilees, it reads, Canaan saw the land of Lebanon and the river of Egypt, and it was very good. And he went into the land of his inheritance to the west, and he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward from the border of Jordan. And it says, and Ham his father, and Cush and Mizraim his brothers, said unto him, Thou hast settled in a land which is not yours, which did not fall to us by lot. Do not do so, for if you do, you and your sons will fall in the land and be accursed through sedition. So Canaan goes into this land, and of course what is believed is there are certain spirits and principalities that existed in this land. He fell victim to it. If you look at Abraham and Lot, Lot wanted to be in Sodom and Gomorrah because Abraham gave him a choice of where he wanted to dwell, and Lot chose Sodom and Gomorrah. And he was supposed to be a righteous judge, but instead of that, he wasn't doing what he was called to do. And of course, Sodom fell by the curse. God had cursed Sodom and Gomorrah, and it rained fire and brimstone. And so in Sodom and Gomorrah, the same thing was happening. They were doing these occultic Mystery Babylon religion practices. And one of the indications of that was that the men of Sodom came when the angels of the Lord came, and these men wanted to have sex with them. They said, let these men come out, and when they come out, then we want to know them, we want to lay with them, because that was one of parts of the rituals that they did. So when you look in Deuteronomy chapter 28, and I'm going to bring this to a close, but I want you to understand that Deuteronomy chapter 28 reinforces what we're saying, because the law was given to Moses and the people of Moses, which I believe were people of color, and it was supposed to be passed down, because not only were they given it, but they were passing it down, and that's why the Bible was very clear that they wanted them to diligently teach their children the ways of God. So in Deuteronomy chapter 28, God gives it, and think about this, the Torah, if you're familiar with, is the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are considered the Torah, or the law of Moses. Now, all the rest of the Bible, basically, that's the foundation for the rest of the Bible. It's called the law of Moses because he gave it to Moses to give to his people. And right before they go into the promised land, God gives them the book of Deuteronomy, and he reiterates to them all the previous parts of the Torah. So in Deuteronomy chapter 28, beginning with verse 1, it says, And it shall come to pass, if you shall hearken diligently to the voice of the Lord your God, to observe and to do all his commandments which I command you this day, that the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, if you shall hearken unto the voice of the Lord your God. So This is God saying to Israel, if you follow my commandments, you'll be blessed. And you will be set apart over all the nations of the world, because you will be a royal priesthood and a holy nation, as was also outlined in the book of Exodus. That was the promise of the covenantal promises of God. If we kept God's Torah, then you would be blessed above all the nations of the earth. But then you draw, and so it has a whole list of blessings. But then, for the sake of time, I don't want to read the whole chapter of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. When you get a chance, I would encourage you to do so. But you drop down to verse 58 of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. It says, if you will not hearken or observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that you may fear this glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed even great plagues, and of long countenance, and sore sickness, and of long continuance. Moreover, he will bring upon you all the diseases of Egypt, which you were afraid of, and they shall cleave unto you. Now he makes a mention again of Egypt because of the fact that the Egyptians followed after these forbidden practices. So he says, if you violate my laws, then you're going to have these same diseases that the Egyptians had. Verse 61, also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon you until you be destroyed, and you shall be left few in number, whereas were the stars of heaven for multitude, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and you shall be plucked from off the land where you go to possess. And the Lord shall scatter you among all the people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor their fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of your feet have rest, but the Lord shall give you there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear the day and the night, and thou shalt have none assurance of your life. In the morning you shall say, would God it were even. Would God it were evening. And at evening you would say, would God that it were morning. For the fear of your heart wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of your eyes will you see. And the Lord shall bring you into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto you, that you shall see it no more again. And there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen. No man shall buy you. It talks about how their children will be sold into slavery, that they would plant vineyards and somebody else would get them. You'll build houses and you won't live in them. It has a whole list of curses, and like I said, when you get a chance to read through them, it seems very specific that when you turn away from the commandments of God, and partially the reason that we turn away from the commandments of God is when we lose our identity and we don't understand exactly who we are as a people. And I'm going to read a couple of the other curses in Deuteronomy chapter 28. It says, verse 45, moreover, all these curses shall come upon you, and shall pursue and overtake you till thou be destroyed, because you obey not the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his ordinances, which he commanded you. And they shall be upon you for signs and wonders, and upon your seed forever. Your seed forever, because you serve not the Lord your God with joyfulness and with a good heart for the abundance of all things. Therefore thou shalt serve your enemies, which the Lord shall send upon you, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in need of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon your neck until he has destroyed you. The Lord shall bring a nation upon you from afar, even from the end of the world, flying swift as an eagle, a nation whose tongue you shall not understand. A nation of a fierce countenance, which will not regard the person of old, nor have compassion of the young. The same shall eat the fruit of your cattle and the fruit of your land until it be destroyed. And he shall leave neither wheat, wine, oil, neither the increase of thy kind, nor the flocks of thy sheep. He shall besiege you in all your cities, and until thine high and strong walls fall down. Verse 53, and thou shalt eat the fruit of your body, even the flesh of your sons and your daughters, which the Lord thy God have given you during the siege, and So it's a whole list of curses that come, and they're very specific. It says that there will be a people from a language you don't understand will come to your land and take you. They'll take your vineyards. You'll plant vineyards and you won't be able to eat from them. Your children will be taken from you. And it's just so specific. And but I want to encourage you before I go, because you know, we talked about how, and I believe that we have violated God's commandments and his laws, especially people of color. When we understand who we are, our identity, and you know, we're descendants of Moses, we're descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're descendants of those of the book, those who will keep God's laws and his commandments. And he says, when you turn away from that, then these plagues will come upon you. And so I believe, because we don't know our identity and we haven't passed on the traditions as we should have of the worship of the true and living God, that we are in a bad place. I think about the time of slavery and how after a certain period of time, blacks began to come out of slavery. You know, slavery was abolished. I believe our communities had started to make some inroads. And then something interesting happened back in the 1960s. Back in the 1960s, the liberals came. And the liberals began to guide and lead Black America, and they implemented things that helped to break down the family, to instill immorality in our culture. And we got to a place where we were so hurt and upset about our plight in America that we have willingly compromised our belief in the Most High God. We have turned away from the commandments of the Lord. And now we embrace homosexuality. We embrace all kind of sexual promiscuity. If you look at black culture and popular black culture and what it's become, if you listen to the music and the hip hop music, you listen to it, it's about materialism, it's about misogyny, disrespecting women, it's about prison culture and jail culture. We now embrace the thug life and the thug culture and all the things of rebelliousness and breaking God's commandments and his laws. If you think about our mortality rate, that African American males have the highest homicide rate in the country, that we have the more violent murders are perpetrated against black males than any other group of people in America. And 90% of those are by people of the same color. If you think about economically, as I stated, if you look in the demographic studies, that Black America has the lowest per capita income of the major ethnic groups. So you have Asians are number 1, Jews are number 2, whites are number 3, Hispanics are number 4. Now blacks are number 5. And I believe that it's time for us to restore the teaching of the true and living God, for us to connect with our roots as the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and once again begin to connect with the Spirit of the Most High God. And these are the promises that God says. He says, if you shall diligently obey the voice of the Lord and observe and to do all his commandments, which I have commanded you this day, then the Lord thy God will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come on you and overtake you. And if you shall obey the voice of the Lord your God, blessed shall thou be in the city, and blessed also in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of your body, and the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of your cattle, the increase of your kind, and the flocks of your sheep. Blessed shall thou be thy basket and thy dough. Blessed shall thou be when you come in, blessed shall you be when you go out. The Lord shall cause your enemies that rise against you to fall before your face, and they shall come out against you one way, they shall flee 7 ways. The Lord shall command the blessings to be with you in your storehouses and in all that that you settest your hand to do, and bless you in the land which the Lord thy God gave you. The Lord shall make you a holy people unto himself, as he has sown unto thee, and if you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God and walk in his ways. Then it says, then all the people of the earth shall see that the name of the Lord is called upon over you, and they shall be afraid of you. Think about this. Africa is the richest continent in the world, but yet the people are among the poorest. And so I just encourage you that as the time grows closer for the return of the Messiah, that we, especially as people of color, turn back to God, his appointed times, his feast days, the Torah, the law of God, which was given unto us. And he promises blessings when we follow after these commandments. Turn away from unrighteousness, turn away from lawlessness, and rebelliousness and turn back to the Most High God, for not only for us but for our children's children, that we should diligently teach our children and our children's children the way of God. This has been Dr. Joe Green. I pray that this is a blessing to you. Please subscribe to our channels, YouTube, Patreon. Pass this on. I believe that the time is growing short, and especially in regards to as we enter into the closer to 2019, I can't tell you exactly how God is going to do it and what he's going to do, but I believe based on his promises and his word, he's going to do something amazing, not only to reconcile those of African descent in America, but to restore us to the place of prosperity, wealth, and peace. Blessings to you, and I'll see you soon.
Refuse to publish any facts of African history that don't go along with our racial theories.
We need to create a religious and a scientific doctrine so that African slavery won't appear that bad after all.
What we need to do is flood the world with new African histories that contain our European perspectives only.
Start renaming people and places. Replace African names with Arabic and European names. This will disguise their black identity. incontrovertible. The facts, the reality is black people designed this civilization.
Could not go from Egypt being a Negro civilization to being a white civilization without rewriting it.
What to do? What are the anthropologists and archaeologists going to do in dealing with this information? And that is what I believe, what's sponsored, maybe consciously in some cases, unconsciously in other cases, what we could call the cover-up. The cover-up of the accomplishments of black people. Chancellor Williams wrote a book called The Destruction of Black Civilization. And in this book he outlines 7 points as to why he feels that there was a cover-up.
Ignore. Just refuse to publish any facts of African history that don't go along with our racial theories.
We need to create a religious and a scientific doctrine so that African slavery won't appear that bad after all.
What we need to do is flood the world with new African histories that contain our European perspectives only.
Start renaming people and places. Replace African names with Arabic and European names.
Let's change the criteria for defining race. For example, 1 drop of Negro blood in America makes you a Negro, no matter how light the skin.
Yes, when reporting ancient African history, reverse the standard. No matter how dark the skin, woolly the hair, or thick the lips, you don't have to be a Negro.
When black contribution to civilization is too obvious, let's find a way to attribute it to outside white influences.
When all the ancient historians contradict your theory, we'll just discredit them.
You could not go from Egypt being a Negro civilization to being a white civilization without rewriting